Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Sage Intelligence Lunch and Learn session. My name is Melanie Howell, and I'm the Marketing Manager here at Frontline Systems. Today, we have Dave Herbert, one of our Sage Intelligence specialists on the call, and he is going to do a quick overview of Sage Intelligence, and I'm excited to see what he will present today. I'm going to turn it over to you, Dave.
All right. Welcome, everyone. First, I'd like to go over just a few facts about Sage Intelligence reporting. The product has been around for about 8 years as of March 2018. It was developed back in 2010. It is an Excel-based product. Whenever you generate a report or run a report, it will produce an Excel spreadsheet. Advantage to this is that you can leverage all your Excel knowledge to take the end result and format it and manipulate it into a form that you can use best. There is a template concept with the product. We'll show you in the demo here how you can create an Excel template so that your users that are running the report, your end users, don't have to go through and recreate all the different parameters and filters. You can set those up. When they run the report, they can get straight to the end result that you want them to get. Sage Intelligence does have some distribution capabilities. You can schedule the reports to run on a timer, and these reports can be either emailed, they can be saved out to an FTP site, or they can even be saved out to a shared folder on your network that you can give everyone access to. Other things for Sage Intelligence is that it can be used with any ODBC compliant database, not just Sage 300 data, but anything that you can connect to with an ODBC connector. And I'll show you a list of samples of those during the demo as well. Sage Intelligence is installed with Sage 300 6.0 or higher. It's just part of the regular setup. It's one of the modules that you check off during the setup, and it installs with all the other modules. Once it's installed, just like any of the other modules, you log into any of your company databases and go to Administrative Services and Data Activation and activate Sage Intelligence just like you would any of the other modules. The components that come with Sage Intelligence, there's a connector, basically is the piece that connects the reports to the data. There's a report manager, which is where you do the bulk of your work, where you modify, create, and run reports. There is an external report designer, and it's kind of specifically used to build financial reports, and it uses more of a drop and drag as opposed to just pushing the data out into Excel and letting you format that data. A report viewer, and this is used for folks who need to run reports and see reports, but not necessarily create the reports themselves. There's also a license manager. It helps you manage your module licenses, and a security manager, so it helps you define the security settings so you can set up reports to be viewed by certain groups within your organization. We'll go over that in a little bit as well. Some of the standard reports that come with Sage Intelligence right out the box, there's quite a few different categories, but they have anything from dashboard analysis to customer sales, general ledger transactions, vendor and inventory reports as well. Once you have activated the data, you can pretty much go into Intelligence, select one of the reports, and run it right out the box. What comes with Sage Intelligence when you install it is a one-user report manager license, and that license allows you to run any of the reports that are included. It allows you to customize reports. It allows you to design some reports with the existing data containers that come with the product. If you had developed some Sage Intelligence reports in another module or an older module, it allows you to import those in, and it will also allow you to set up some scheduling. Talking about licensing, the way Sage Intelligence report licensing works. For the report manager, each license is a user and workstation specific. So let's say if you had 5 licenses, I logged in on my computer, that would use up one license. If I walked over to Melanie's computer and logged into her Sage and went into Sage Intelligence on her workstation, that would burn a second license. And if Melanie came to my workstation and logged in, that would burn a third, and so on and so on. So they're based off of username and workstation. So something to keep in mind when you're trying to figure out how many licenses you're going to need. It's going to be on a user per workstation basis. Now, let's say Melanie had a problem and I walked over to her machine, I logged in on there and did some work and came out and had burned a license. This is where you would use the license manager to remove that instance, so that would free up a license for someone else that might need it. And I'll show you that when we get into the license manager. The different types of licenses that are available, once again, are connector license, there's a report manager, and a report viewer license. So you're probably saying, which one is right for me? Well, if you're going to have multiple users that just run reports, you're going to need a viewer license for each one of those users. If you have multiple users that are going to be designing reports, in other words, if you have more than one IT person or one accountant or something that's going to be designing reports, you're going to need a report manager license for each one of those users. If you're going to connect to databases outside of Sage 300 or do Sage 300 consolidations, you're going to need a connector license, but you only need one per site. And if you're going to use the report designer tool for financial reporting, you'll also need one per site of that as well. So the basic report design is very simple. You have your data sitting out here, Sage 300. It could be other types of data, warehouse management systems, an external tracking system, or Sage CRM data. You use the connector as sort of a middleman that connects the data to the report manager. And in the connectors where you build your connections to your databases, you define something called a container, the tables and data you're pulling. It can be, the connector can use multiple drivers, talking about the different types of databases like SQL and Oracle and MySQL and things like that. Connector also has predefined containers just for Sage 300, and those are installed when you do the installation. The report manager is where you do the bulk of your work. This is where you'll design your reports with those containers. This is where you'll set up your sort and parameter filter options. You can do some summations here. And then when you run these, this is where it will output to the Excel workbooks. With all of that said, let's create a standard report. I've opened up Sage 300 in the sample company, and I've clicked on Intelligence Reporting. And you can see I have my different components here. The first component we're going to go into is going to be Report Manager. So when you come into Report Manager, you'll see you have sort of a tree view here on the left and the Properties tab on the right. These are all the built-in reports that come with Sage Intelligence out the box. So when I click on one of these nodes, you'll see I have two master ARs. One is designated as a 3.6, and that's different ones have different data in them or different fields. To use one of these, you can't edit the report directly, so you need to make a copy. So what we do is we'll go up to the home node and we'll add a new folder. And then under my new folder, I'll say add a report. And so for our demonstration today, we're just going to do a standard report. And it'll just be customer invoices. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pick a data container and a connection. So did a little research and I figured out that all the data I need is down here in the Sales Master AR. I'll click OK. And when it does that, it will show me all the fields that are available for my report. So I'm going to come in and pick some fields. I'm going to pick customer name and number. We're going to need a date and an invoice number. We're going to need a line item amount and a salesperson. So I'm just going to create a very simple invoice report here. It's called Customer Invoices. Now, I'm going to go through a few of these tabs here on top. The first one being the Property tab, you'll notice that the Show Advanced is unchecked. We're going to check this off because in order to get this report to show up in the Report Viewer module, we have to come down here and say Allow for Report Viewer. So I want to do that here. And some of these other options that you'll see here, like parameters on the second sheet, you'll leave those checked. Always automatically format the first sheet. And so you can decide which one of these, some of these parameters you want to have optional. But for our most part, we just want to show it on the viewer. So I'll come into here and It'll ask me if I want to save my changes, and I do. So now it comes in under columns and shows me all the columns I selected for my report. So this is the order they're actually going to come into the spreadsheet. So what I'm going to do is kind of reorganize these. So I'm going to put the number first, and then I'm going to put my salesperson up at the top. And then I got my name, number, date, count, and my amount. So that looks like a pretty good ordering of those. And I could go here at this point and hit the refresh button, and I have that saved, and then come back to in here, and I could run this, and this would just be a dump of all that data. What I want to do, though, is I'm going to show you how we're going to add some filtering. So, for instance, let's say we only want to see open invoices. So I'm going to come in, and I'm going to grab my line item with tip, grab a field, and I'm going to say greater than or equal to. And for our purposes, I'm going to put in $0. So this will give me all invoices still have a positive balance on them. Now, you notice there's some ellipses here and a little @ sign. If this was a field like a sales rep field, I could actually do a lookup and it'll actually go and find a value for me. If I had a date field, and let's say I wanted to say this, I wanted to make this report for all invoices greater than the first of the month, I could click my little system variable button here and open this guy up, and it'll show me all the system variables that are available. So I could come in and say, make the invoice date greater than or equal to month start. You'll notice what month I'm in, and it'll notice what the first day is, and I can get everything from first of the month forward. So the system variables will give you some predefined things. You won't have to try to figure out, well, if I'm here on the 6th, how do I know it's going to come from the 1st to the 30th or whatever? You have those already figured out for you. So in our case, we're going to do our 0. And so the next thing I want to show, I could go ahead and refresh this again and run it, and then you can see all the invoices that have greater than 0 in the line sales amount. But let's say I want to be able to select this by a particular sales rep. So I'm going to come into the parameters here, and I'm going to look for my sales rep name, and I'm going to say equal to. Now, in this one, for the default, I'm not going to put a particular sales rep. I'm going to let the user choose it. So I'm going to just enter or select salesperson. This is going to be the prompt that the end user is going to see when they go to run a report. And once again, you could also use the ellipse to look up a value or use a little @ sign to pick a system variable if you wanted to. We're not going to use any of the sort fields or the aggregate filters for now. We're just going to use these couple of things we had here. I'm going to go ahead and refresh. And at this time, I can come in and run my report. And it's going to come up here and prompt me for a salesperson. It goes out there and gets me a list. So I'm going to just choose Bill. And it goes through its little calculations and basically builds me a raw table of Bill's invoices that had a positive amount. Okay, so when it builds these spreadsheets, it puts the raw data in the leftmost sheet of the spreadsheet. Sheet number 2 is always going to contain your parameters that you ran. So depending on how many parameters and filters you set up, you'll see all that different information stored here. And then if sheet 3 will most likely be blank. In order to kind of clean this up a little bit, we're going to go ahead and create a pivot table off of this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to go to my Insert tab. I'm going to say Create a Pivot. And for the table range here, I'm going to come in and just hit F3. And I'm going to choose Raw Data. Raw Data is the kind of the name that it gave this table when it dumped in there. So it's automatic for each Sage Intelligence report that you get. So you can make sure that you're always grabbing all the data that comes in. You don't want to specify a specific range because if you run a different variance of this report and the data range is different, you may or may not have all the data. So I'm going to use in my case here, I'm going to use an existing worksheet, and I'm just going to pick sheet 3, cell 2 there, since I know it's blank already. Or you could create a new worksheet, it doesn't matter. And it'll insert that pivot. Now we just have to complete it. On our rows here, we're going to put customer name, and we're going to put the invoice number. Over here under values, we're going to be summing up some of that. And you can kind of see my report starting to take shape here. I'm starting to see breakdowns by customer, and I'm starting to see the amounts for each individual invoice. These amounts look a little bit ugly, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of format them a little bit. So I'm going to click onto the drop down for the value settings, go into number format. I'm going to choose accounting and save it. And now I've got an accounting format for my numbers. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of pretty this up a little bit. I'm going to call this customer. And over here, I was going to call this totals. And then what I'm going to do over here is I want to come in and I'm going to say that this is going to be CSTO customer invoices for, and I'm going to say ampersand. I'm going to go to sheet 2 and I'm going to pick that right there. So I'm basically just creating a little string here that's going to get who I built this table for. And actually, instead of saying that customer, I'm going to say for salesperson and do it like that. And so now I'll know who the salesperson is. So I got that built. Got all my totals here. Gives me a total of what he had, and so there's my basic report. Now I want to do is I want to create this as a template so that everybody that runs it doesn't have to go through all this formatting and everything to get the report. So what I'm going to do to save it as a template is I'm going to go, first off, I'm going to hide sheet 1. I don't need this, the end user doesn't need to see the raw data, and they don't need to see the parameters. And I'm going to rename this pivot. And once I get the report looking pretty much like I want, I'm going to jump back into Report Manager over here, and I'm going to say Save as an Excel template. I'm going to choose Book 1. Since I had the sheet open, it knows that's the one we had. It's going to give me a little warning about the second page being the parameters. It's going to need to be cleared. And I say, yes, that's okay. I'm going to create a standard Excel template. I'm going to accept the customer name. You can give this any name you want. I'm going to just go ahead and accept what it gave me there. I'm going to switch off the save data option. And when it's all done, it says my template was successfully created. Now I can test this, go out here to run, and let's say this time we were running for Rhonda Barnes. So there's Rhonda Barnes. That's as simple as that. And if you came back out to Report Manager and ran a second copy of it, and this time I'll choose David Sanjos, it'll create a second spreadsheet. So it doesn't overwrite your first one. It'll create actually a second instance for each one you choose. So now we come out here, we can see David Barnes Sanjos just had one invoice. All right. So that's pretty much, in a very quick overview, how to create a report with intelligence reporting. One of the modules that we talked about was the connector. This is how we connect that report manager to the data. So I'm going to open up the connector module and just kind of go over the pieces of it real quick. When you first load it, there's an enterprise node here. It just gives you a few little properties about where we are. It basically says where its SQL's at, how it's connecting, what database, what SQL server. So when I double click it, it opens up, and these are all the different data types, ODBC data types that you can have that'll connect to the Sage Intelligence reporting. And as you can see, there's connectors for Oracle and Pervasive and MySQL and all the old databases from yesteryear like DBase and Visual Fox Pro, some old Sage product lines as well. The one in bold here, when you double click it and open that node up for the ODBC SQL Server, these are two that get installed when you install Sage Intelligence, and these are the ones that are automatically connected to your Sage 300 data. The difference between the two is you would use the auto connect connection if you were just going to be reporting on a single company. Now, if your customer, or if the report you're going to do is going to do some consolidations over multiple companies, you'd want to use the consolidation connection. But inside of here, when you double click this one, this will show you all the different data containers that it has. And when you double click a container, it will show you all the different fields that you have in that container. So if someone gives you a report request and says, okay, I need a sales report that has the customer information, some invoice information, and some salesperson information, you can kind of open one of these containers and say, well, let's see, I got that there. I got the customer number here. I've got some line data. It looks like this is the one I can use. So now you know that this will be a good container for you to use, and you won't have to reinvent or create a new container. For those on the more technical side, they may want to see the SQL of what this container does. So this little button over here will show you the SQL code that actually gets run when you run that connector. And it tells you what kind it is. So you can have different kinds of containers. You can have a straight table. You can do a join where you have multiple tables. You can reference a view that you've created in SQL. You can do something called a graphical join, which I'll show you an example of in a second. Or you can just create an ad hoc query right here and put that in there. So in this case, we had a join on this one. Inventory master is one I want to show because it actually uses a graphical join. And so there, when you select graphical join, you get this neat little graphical join tool. The advantage of this, it gives you a kind of a picture of what tables you have and what their relationships are. So if I right click on one of these join connectors, it'll tell me item number joins to item number. And you can set it's an outer join, so you can set the different kinds of joins. You can remove it, you can reverse the polarity, switch the left side to the right side, and so on. So you can do a lot of the SQL coding per se right here in the graphical tool. And then when you're done, you can just apply it, and it'll build that join for you. You can also click this and see the SQL that's created as well. So a graphical join tool is just a kind of a picture or an easier way sometimes. If you've got a lot of different databases and they're different joins on different fields, you can kind of see the overall picture of how they're related together. One other note to make about containers and reports is every standard intelligence report needs to reference one and only one data container, only one of these guys. But any one of these data containers can represent multiple reports. So I can click on the Sales Master AR and click on dependencies and see that one container is being used in report 212, report 219, report 214, and report 85. And where that's important at is if I came in to the Sales Master and I looked at, let's say, the customer name, and I can see here that this is an expression. It's an R-trim of the name cust field. If I came in and added something like R-trim and it said plus some other field, some code or something, that's how it's going to, in any of those other reports, if the customer name is being used, that's how it's going to change. So it can be a good thing where it says, okay, I need to make this change on all the reports. I want to make sure this customer name looks like this. Or it could be a bad thing. It says you might think that you're changing it for one of your reports, and then someone says, hey, I ran the master sales AR and the customer name looks funny. It doesn't look like it used to. So it's sort of a global way of being able to make those changes, and to see which reports this affects, you just use that dependencies button there. The next thing I wanted to show you some of the other modules that come in intelligence reporting. First one, this will be the report viewer. This will be the one that would be used for folks that want to see run reports, but not necessarily design and create reports. So you would open up the viewer, and you would see all the different reports that came in. And then because we went on that advanced properties and chose to include our customer invoice report, it'll show up under my reports. And so you can come in, and just from right here in the viewer, you can click on run, and that little parameter box will come up. We can choose Susan here and then run it. So we're actually running this without having report manager. And our little report comes up. It's got Susan in there. It's got her invoices, just like we want. So that's how the report viewer looks. The security manager is where you would go in and set up security on your reports. And what this allows you to do, in my demo case here, don't have security turned on, but let's say you had multiple divisions in your company, like maybe you have an executive division, a sales division, accounting division, and a warehouse division. There may be reports that you only want the executives to see and not the sales and warehouse people. What you would do is you'd come set up different roles in here, and you would assign people to those roles, and in the report you can say that this particular report can only be run by an executive. This particular report can only be run by a warehouse guy, and so on. So that way, when someone's in here and they're logged in, they'll only see the reports that they have privileges or approvals to see. And you can contain and control all of that through the security manager. Then the last one we have here is the license manager. And this is what I was talking about before, is if I had walked over to Melanie's computer and did some work and I burned up a license, I could come back in here, select that license for Melanie's and delete it, and that would free up one of my licenses. The overall license manager tells you the statuses of what you have. So I have my one connector license, I have my analysis license, I've got one report viewer license, I have a designer license, and I've got 2 report manager licenses. And then here's the ones that have been assigned out at this point. So I've only used one of my report manager licenses. With that, are there any other questions? Got one real world example of where using Sage Intelligence over standard reporting would make sense. You might want to do a Sage Intelligence report over a regular report where, let's say you run a regular report, but you bring it into Excel and you manipulate it, trim out a bunch of unneeded fields and things in format, and then pass it up to like an executive committee or something. Well, you could come into Sage Intelligence and create that report so that you only have to run it one time. You won't have to run it out of the Sage AR or order entry module. You can just come in running out of Intelligence and send that report straight to the executive committee. You also have the ability, one of the great features is the ability to run the reports on a schedule and have them emailed or dropped to where an executive or somebody could go into a folder and pick up that report automatically. What features we get out of the box? So the features you get right out of the box, you get the connector, you get the report manager, you get the report financial designer, the viewer, the license, and security manager. And those drop right off of should be a node on the pane inside of Sage 300. And once you click there, you'll see the different nodes there, and you can jump right in and use those. Let's go ahead and look at another, maybe sample in Report Manager of an out-of-the-box report. So let's say if I go into financials and I go and look at general ledger details, and I'm just going to go ahead and run it here. I'm not going to make any edits to it. So you can see it comes up here and says, what fiscal year do I want to do? So I'm going to do 2020. And we're going to do from period 1 to, let's do period 3. So it'll be first quarter. So here's how you set up multiple parameters. And so here's the general ledger transactions. It'll tell you what fiscal year and period they're from, and it breaks it down by account. And neat little GL quarterly report. And you can come in, and if you had different options here, you could, let's say if we had if we had the ability to choose multiple fiscal years, we could do that. We can, since we did choose multiple periods, we have 1, 2, or 3, but let's say we only really want to see period 2. So now we just got period 2 entries. So right here on the fly, we were able to change the report. If I only wanted to see certain types of accounts, I want to see, let's see, balance sheet items. And just my balance sheets will come up here.